Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have with us today in the studio Dr. Tony Kriz. And we've had him on before, but it's been a while. And today we're going to talk to him about his latest book called ALOOF. He's a professor, he's an educator, he is a writer. And there's a picture of the book on the screen. You can check it out at the bookstores put out by Thomas Nelson. Look for it at Evangel or at Christian Discount Books or Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You're going to want to get it. How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You've been preaching. You were preaching at Patrick Doyle's church, which should have been an experience.
It was fantastic.
Good for you. Hey, a lot to talk to you about. But first of all, the book. What are you doing with this one? Because the Neighbors and Wisemen was fantastic.
Yeah.
What's this one?
Yeah. So this is I try and write on topics that I feel like aren't getting addressed well, particularly in the religious world. And this book is a discussion of God's hiddenness. What do we do with the fact that God hides? How do we process that concept? And it's, I think the reality is religion seems to promise that God will show up in these super tangible, visceral ways. Yeah. Worship leaders stand on stage and they say, God is speaking to me, God is near me, God is touching me. And I think most people sit in the pew and they never have those experiences, and they feel maybe that there's something wrong with them, maybe that they're broken or something. And pastors come to the podium and they say, God spoke to me this week and told me to tell you blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And the person in the audience goes, God has never spoken to me. How do I process that? And so I wanted to write a book about how do we process our life if God isn't particularly tangible all the time, or if we do have long spaces of silence where it doesn't seem like God is as close as religion talks about.
And you've never experienced that.
No, I've experienced that a lot, yeah. And so there's a hope to kind of process that. And there's, in the book, in the first chapter, actually, my 4-year-old nephew contracted cancer, a really despicable form of cancer. And that sort of was the thing that stimulated the writing, was my family trying to process pain and where's God right now. That was sort of the beginning. It's not a book about loss specifically, but that was the thing that started the conversation. And I know a lot of people understand loss and pain. We all do.
You've been very active in addressing the culture as well.
Yeah.
It's very much a part of who you are, what you do. And this is such a vast topic. We spent a lot of time here at theDove trying to figure out the generational shifts that have happened.
Yeah.
We've gone through. We look at that a lot. But there is great concern today, is the church chasing the culture in order to win it, to convert it?
Yeah.
And if so, what's falling through the cracks?
Yeah, it's, I mean, that's a huge topic, Perry. I mean, to throw that out there, how many hours do we have?
Yeah.
Because on some level, we are called to chase the culture. On some level, we are called to be Jew to Jews and Greek to Greeks, as Paul talked about. We are called to incarnate ourselves on a very particular level. I would argue on a neighborhood level, to particularize our faith and our practice with Jesus. But on the other hand, to your concern, I feel like so often we are trying to compete with the culture in areas that practically we just can't win, but eternally, theologically, we're not called to compete in those ways. So we try and compete by having flashier meetings and bigger personalities and better technology. And these are all things where we're going to be beat by the culture every day. We're going to be beat by cable TV. We're going to be beat by YouTube. We're going to be beat by our concerts that people go to. There's no way we can do a better show than the culture. But there are things that the culture cannot do. The culture cannot offer people prayer. The culture can't offer people silence. We live in a world that is 15 minutes old. Yeah. Most of my generation, they don't even have a relationship with their grandparents, let alone anything that's older than a week in their life. And yet, faith can offer them 5,000 years of history, of sacred processes where they get to step into humanity across time and space and join them at the table of communion, for instance. There are so many things that we can offer our neighbors that the culture absolutely can't compete on, and I wonder why we don't focus on those things more.
So why do we seem to be chasing it the way we are? I mean, you make a great point, because most of our research shows that the church is at least 6 months, if not 18 months behind the various trends.
Right.
And I don't understand what we're trying to do.
I don't understand either. You know, like right now in our culture, one of the biggest issues is race and racial reconciliation.
Right, yeah.
This is a topic that has been at the center of the church's work since at least the time of Jesus, if not before. And yet, I feel like we've given up that topic to be argued within the secular world, where we should really be at the center. In ALOOF, there's a chapter called God is Black, which is how my family submitting ourselves to African Americans has helped me hear God's voice in a way I could never hear it before. There's another chapter called the One Behind Everything, which is how my Cherokee mentor has taught me about God and following Jesus in a way that I never could have learned. That by coming into these mutually submitted relationships across racial lines, that there's this profoundness that happens. And why aren't we in these conversations more as the people of God?
Why aren't we?
I don't know. I think it's because maybe part of it is we're losing market share. And how are we going to pay our bills becomes the driving question. How are we going to fill our pews becomes the driving question so often, as opposed to what is God really inviting us to say and do.
It's been said that we've done a great job in evangelism. We get a D- in discipleship. We're more interested in filling the house than we are training the person. Do you think that's true?
Another big topic, another huge topic. As part of me wants to, I want to conflate evangelism and discipleship more than we ever have before. I think we need to be inviting people who have been going to church for years back into the beauty of the gospel like they never have before. I think into conversion, almost on a daily level than ever before. But certainly, are we presenting, back to our earlier conversation, are we presenting a profound vision, profound prophetic vision of the life of God's people as we invite the whole world into that same vision as well? Are we presenting that? I don't know that we are.
You know, because it's so interesting, you can flip across the dial and you'll see incredible mega churches with huge crowds. And I'm not against mega churches, just if you start looking at this, Christianity is alive and well in America, but we're not changing the culture. We haven't addressed the race issue. I interviewed Bishop T.D. Jakes the other day, and he has now come to the conclusion with some other black bishops in his congregation and elsewhere that it's time to come out of the church and go in and start doing the reconciling. So he seems to feel like we need to go back in and begin to reconcile. We're not talking about the black race and the red race, the brown race. We're talking about the human race. You know, he's seeing that. But, you know, Tony, we don't seem to be changing things.
Nope.
And I don't know if it's because we've been allowed ourselves to be politicized. Is that it? I mean, we've been called to be the thermostat, not the thermometer, but we're not setting the culture's temperature.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly in one hand, we're not. In another hand, I think we don't even realize the work of God around us, and that there really are ways that we are increasingly getting involved in these things. I think Bishop Jakes is a great example of someone who is increasingly stepping in and helping set the tone. And I've been spending some time with Christian leaders across the country on the question of race specifically, and in Ferguson and in different realms where there's really been a tinderbox. And I think that there is hope there. And I think this new civil rights movement is very much saturated with people of faith. And so I'm in many levels encouraged.
The one in South Carolina, they handled it extremely well.
Yeah.
I mean, they depoliticized it before it ever really hit the press, which was wonderful. You know?
And that was a lot of pastors, a lot of Christian leaders at the center of all of that.
Do you think race is a topic that pastors would preach on?
Well, it's a huge challenge. You and I, two, middle-class white guys sitting here having the conversation. It's very difficult as a majority culture to step up and speak with authority on a question of race because, quite frankly, we don't know what the heck we're talking about.
Right.
And one of the things I would want to call the church to is an opening of our pulpits to non-white people, to actually be the ones, to even submitting ourselves, our congregations, to non-white folk to come and be our leaders, to be our elders around these issues. So that's part of the challenge is when white people speak on these things, there's a level of ignorance, there's a level that we just cannot understand.
Right.
And secondarily, just practically, it's easy to dismiss a white voice, and rightfully so.
Yeah. All right. Let me take a quick break. We'll be back with Tony. He's the author, his latest book, here it is. You may want to check it out. It's called ALOOF. And I want to get a little deeper in the book when we come back. We'll be right back with Tony Kriz in just a minute.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with Tony Kriz, and he's authored some books, and he lectures. He's a professor, and he has his PhD in, let's see here, ministry.
Spiritual formation.
Spiritual formation. So what was your thesis?
My thesis was called Anglican Eucharistic Liturgy, a Church Planting Hope for the Post-Christian Culture of the Pacific Northwest. That was the title.
That was your thesis.
No,
Really?
but the topic was on how, we talked about this a little bit earlier, on how many of the historical church forms, I think, are going to have a strong missional place in the future of post-Christendom in North America. And so I was talking about how things like liturgy and communion, sacraments, that these things are going to become incredibly missional as because people don't get sacredness anywhere else in their life. And the church can offer sacredness to non-churched, even non-religious people.
Boy, you opened up another can of worms.
I know, I do
of,
that.
Holiness and sacredness. Let me just jump ahead a little bit. What do you think the message of the American church is today?
What do I think the message of the American church is today?
Yeah, I mean, if people were just saying, I'm going to give this faith thing a look at, what do you think they're going to get in the way of a message?
I think what people hear is either just a tribalism, so all they hear is static, a tribalism that the church is only really talking for itself, and so it doesn't apply to me, so I just hear static when it comes to the church. Or I think people hear a power agenda, where the church used to be the big dog on the block, and it's not anymore. And again, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in a post-Christian context. This may not be true across the whole nation, right, but where the church is sort of now this wounded, weak animal that's trying to hold on to power that it once felt like it had and it doesn't have anymore. So what do they see? They see what happens on Fox News. They see what happens in the political sphere. But they don't see much of anything else.
Sacredness.
Yeah.
What concerns me is that and I want to say this respectfully, but if we're not careful, we make Jesus a dude.
Right.
And what slips through the cracks is the holiness and the sacredness and the righteousness of God. I mean, we just don't sense it and see it. We turn some of our worship services into a nightclub.
I wouldn't disagree with you. Now, that's easy for me to say because my spiritual temperament, just the way God made me, I would rather meditate than jump up and down. I like silence, and I like candles. I like liturgy. I like written prayers as opposed to spontaneous, cool-sounding prayers. That's the way that I'm wired. So it's easy for me to critique it, but there's some truth to that. And Jesus is incredibly beautiful. But also, what's the line in C.S. Lewis's, is he safe? No, he's not safe, but he's good. And I think we treat Jesus as if Jesus is safe. And
we've merchandised him into something else.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the line is, all that. I don't want to be critical either, but from what I'm sensing is that there's a real hunger for an authentic relationship with God, and everybody's trying to describe what that may be. But what seems to fall through the cracks is a reverence or a holiness.
Yeah.
And I don't mean legalism.
Right.
But I mean, a genuine reverence and holiness.
Yeah. Another piece along the way is because of the triumphalism in the language of religious leaders, the illusion that the person up front has it all figured out, or that their life with God is just full of joy and hope and peace and purpose at all times, that comes off as shallow and trite, because it's just not true. It's just not true. And most people don't experience a triumphal life with God. They experience a very real life with God, and God wants to step into our sorrow. God wants to step into our pain and the silence so much. Part of the reason I wrote ALOOF was to try and go, if you feel like your life with God is not triumphalistic all the time, you are not alone. In fact, most of the characters of the Bible do not have triumphalistic relationships with God. They have plodding, silent, often tortured relationships with God. Mother Teresa said she never once had an encounter with God in her entire life. You are not alone. If you are desperately trying to hold on to God and don't necessarily feel the warm, fuzzy feedback that religion has promised you you're supposed to get, you are not alone. You are in good company. Now then, how should we live? That's the question.
Yeah, because one of the questions that pops up, why would God put all these promises in the book and then be quiet about them?
Or are those promises really there the way we frame them?
That's a great question.
I think so often we pick and choose the passages that most line up with our we've got it all figured out, look how great we are, just come and you'll get your spiritual fix if you come to our church. And then we pick and choose those passages as opposed to the long sections of silence, for instance, with the long sections of loss that happen throughout the Bible. It's interesting that even in the book of Acts, it's only through just over the first half of the book of Acts, God shows up in almost every chapter in some way, speaks to somebody directly, does a direct healing or miracle. The last half of the book of Acts, God doesn't show up hardly at all, indirectly. Certainly God is totally involved. But the book of Acts, which is supposed to be the book of miracles, the book of the early church, the last half, God is fairly silent. And I've never heard a pastor say that from the podium ever in my life.
So you're saying this in the book, and you make a great point, and that is what's being taught from the pulpit about, well, I shouldn't say taught, but at least expressed from the pulpit. God spoke to me, and I'm having a tough day, and I haven't heard God's voice, and I can't remember when, if at all, so I must be inferior.
That's it. Is there something broken inside of me? I think it's the question a lot of people are scared to ask. The question exists. They're scared to bring it to the surface because they'll be invalidated by their religious community. So what they do is they stuff the question, is there something just wrong with me? Am I just not fitting into God's agenda? And then they spend their whole life pretending, going through the behaviors of religion and God showing up as they go about church and walk the foyer.
So what do you want them to get from this?
I want them to stop pretending. I think it's pandemic.
Really? I can't disagree with you. So how would you walk somebody out of this?
Well, it has to happen within community. It has to happen within relationship. The hope is in writing a book like ALOOF, where I get pretty honest, even visceral, in my feelings, my emotions, my failures, my doubts, to go, I'm attempting to start the conversation. I'm attempting to sort of put some vocabulary on the table, and hopefully others will pick it up and go, I'm gonna risk to talk about this other end of the spectrum. I'm not saying that the beautiful, pleasant, end of the spectrum does not exist with God. It absolutely does, but often we ignore this whole other side. And how can we possibly live a full spiritual life if we're not embracing both ends? So I want to just help people begin to have that conversation with their friends, in their household, in their small groups, and hopefully it'll make it to the pulpit.
ALOOF, get a copy of it, ALOOF. By the way, Tony Kriz, KRIZ.com is his website. Check it out. You wrote this from experience.
Oh yeah, it's all stories. If you like stories, you'll love this book.
You ever feel like God's abandoned you?
Yeah. Yep.
How'd you get through it?
Well, not easy. Again, I think often one of our problems is in some religious spheres, not all, we want to propagate this quick fix culture. That if you just do this formula, say this prayer, do these 3 steps, everything will be great. And it's completely inconsistent with both biblical history and church history. My seasons of great pain, great loss, have been years often in the desert, to use a metaphor, years of longing and loss. I was overseas. We talked about this last time I was on the show. I was overseas for 8 years, working in some difficult points around the world, and my particular false beliefs about what makes me valid, what makes me good, what it'll take for God to like me and accept me, were based in lies. They were based in my performance, and that led to massive burnout and a really embarrassing failure overseas, being fired publicly, shamefully. And a year before that firing happened, I was in desperate pain around my faith and spirituality. I get into that quite a bit in ALOOF. And there was a year of being a missionary leader with a dead soul, being publicly fired, and then a year and a half after of just hurt and loss and feeling like my heart was dead and could never recover and that God had abandoned me. Not true, but that's what it felt like. And here's the reality, Perry, that I'm convinced of. I am not the most important character in my own spiritual story. God is the most important character. God is more emotionally committed to my spiritual story than I am. And God was with me. Silently, yes, but was with me. And those experiences were a great mercy, a severe mercy in my life.
Have you ever heard the voice of God?
I have.
And
a couple of times in 44 years.
Okay, so you know it can happen.
It can happen.
Did it catch you by surprise?
Yes.
Both times?
Both times.
Okay, and that's usually, every time I ask that question, that's what I usually hear. It was when you weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, because I'm not the most important character. If I was the most important character, I would be able to conjure that experience when I want it. Yet if God's the most important character, God's taking the lead.
Good stuff. Tony Kriz, get this book, ALOOF. I think you'll find it to be pretty solid stuff for you to have in your life. Because I think we all go through those times where God's real quiet. And this will help you through that. TonyKriz.com is his website, and be looking for some of his videos on the Dove TV. We're going to work something out and get him on there. Off the Highway, which is the little vignettes you'll see here on the Dove TV. Thank you, brother. I think you need to be doing a show on the Dove TV network. I think you're touching a lot of great spots and nerves here this morning, so thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with Bryan Platt. He's with Jackson County Right to Life, and a big national picket coming up this weekend, and coming up on Saturday from 10 until noon. And we got some other things. Hi, Bryan, tell us about this.
Okay, well, so this is something we just kind of stumbled across. You know, we do our info picket once a month downtown by the offices of Planned Parenthood in Medford, and a consortium of national pro-life groups decided on this date and making it a national event, kind of to keep the heat on. You know, I mean, things are happening out there, Perry, and I wanted to cover a couple of those, but it's an exciting time if you've been battling this Goliath, you know, for so long. I mean, it's just incredible. The more time I spend on the internet digging in and researching Planned Parenthood, the more overwhelming the task seems to be. So this is a national effort. The last I checked, there were 186 participating towns in 44 states. Wow. We have them in Roseburg, Bend, Eugene, Salem, Portland, Grants Pass, and Medford in the state of Oregon. Wow. And we do need to mention that Grants Pass will be having one at the same time from 10 to 12, meet at the county courthouse, which is their typical meeting point for their march, you know, for Roe v. Wade as well. So, so ours is back at the usual place, the corner of 8th and Central. We're going to go 2 hours. You're welcome to come for a half hour, an hour, for the entire 2 hours. Probably bring some suntan lotion and a straw hat and even a lawn chair. You know, traffic downtown on a Saturday, you know, it may not be the greatest, but we want to be there because we want to be part of the solidarity of the pro-life movement and standing up against Planned Parenthood. All
right, this Saturday downtown, 8th and Central, and Bryan has all the signs. Come on down, and the last time we did that, all the signs went out.
We won't run out of signs this time.
Oh, really? And this is a great opportunity. We'll be reminding you throughout the week again. This is a nationwide picket, so this is really great. And the people who showed up last time, I was stunned. Who came? It was wonderful. So I'll be there from 10 until 12. All right, the health clinics.
Let's just talk about Planned Parenthood just a little bit here. So. It's, you know, there's momentum building on this thing. I mean, these videos, the timing of them, the content of them has been really a God thing. I mean, it's really been a God thing. So here, just kind of put your hands or your brain around all these things. This is just in the last week with respect to Planned Parenthood on a nationwide basis. Wow. So the state of Indiana passes a bill which documents how baby bodies are disposed of, and I mean, these aren't the greatest topics in the world to talk about, but the reality is Indiana had no idea how babies' bodies, as the result of an abortion, were being disposed of. So what this has done is it's forcing the abortionist to get a consent form from the parents, because we learned in the 6th video that the harvesters don't even bother getting consent. If they need a liver, they just go pick through the body remains and they find the liver. They have no idea who it's from, whether the mother gave consent or not. Arkansas became the 4th state. Interestingly, Utah, over the weekend, became the 5th state to defund Planned Parenthood. Wow. Can you imagine what would happen in Oregon in terms of lives being saved if Oregon said no more Oregon Health Plan funds go to Planned Parenthood in Oregon? We talked about this. This is roughly 9,000 babies being aborted in the state, and roughly a third of those are being paid for with our tax money. We would be saving thousands, literally thousands of babies' lives in the state of Oregon if we could defund like these other 5 states now have had the courage. STEM Express. The harvesters, the ones that went into the Planned Parenthood clinics and harvested, they've severed ties with Planned Parenthood. So Planned Parenthood has been hurt by the loss of a source of funding because STEM Express was buying those baby body parts.
A customer.
A customer, exactly right. Yeah. Missouri comes out and says, gee, we don't have any idea what's happening to the aborted baby bodies in the state of Missouri either. And that's extremely troubling to them because St. Louis is one of the locations of the sting videos that the Center for Medical Progress had. And so they're being implicated as being complicit in this, you know, even though the state officially has no idea what happens to baby body parts. Planned Parenthood claims that the fetal tissue is critical for therapeutic research purposes, and yet what do they call that? They fact check them, Snopes, you know, that kind of thing. The fact check is that, in fact, not a single therapeutic purpose has been successful in the using fetal tissue.
That's right.
Every single therapy that's been developed has an alternative.
Right.
that's non every single one. It's kind of like the stem cell thing, you know, using embryonic stem cells as opposed to adult stem cells. There's no justification for the embryonic cells. Everything can be done with adult. 12 states have opened investigations into the Planned Parenthoods in their states.
Wow.
And then, of course, the 6th video comes out where the STEM Express former employee talks about how they've just got these charts, and it's just a clinical thing. It's just unbelievably heartless. So this has all happened in 1 week's time. So Goliath is taking some body blows. And we've actually had, in the state of Oregon, Clackamas, Gresham, and a brand new facility, well, relatively speaking, in McMinnville was built just a few years ago. And I recall this because at our Oregon Right to Life board meetings, there was a lot of consternation about the fact that this place was being built. It was a mega clinic, and the local chapters up there picketed it. They even got contractors to refuse to participate in the construction of it and whatnot. It had to close.
Good.
So Oregon Oregon Planned Parenthood is feeling some of those hits as well.
Wow.
So it's happening. I mean, these little incremental
and
things,
I think,
perhaps.
folks, look, as good as this news is, it's not an excuse to not get involved. In fact, if anything, this is the time for you to give full throttle to this. And so come on out Saturday, be there from 10 until noon, and make yourself available to this information. I would be writing your legislators and asking them to stop your tax dollars going to Planned Parenthood. We had that on the ballot, or we didn't get it on the ballot, but now maybe we can.
Yeah, that actually is. It could be another, fallout from this thing. And for listeners of the Dove or viewers of the Dove in other areas, all you have to do is Google something like Planned Parenthood picket August 22nd, and it'll come up, and there'll be a number of different places that you can go to find out where specifically in your area, because we do have Roseburg Bend.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those are areas that the Dove gets into.
Right.
Of course, Grants Pass is happening from 10 to 12 in front of the county courthouse over there. So lots of opportunities, and absolutely, this is a reason to continue to participate. It's certainly not a reason to pull away.
All right, now we're getting ready to go back to school here in a couple of weeks, and beware.
I feel like I was on the way over. Janet Parshall had that ad. She goes, "Lord, why now? Why me? Why am I living at a time like this? It's all so complicated." I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. There's so much going on, so many opportunities in the pro-life movement, but the one that really, for our chapter right now, that really comes home is this thing about these school-based health centers. And it has to do, I think, partially with existent Oregon law, which basically gives a medical professional, whoever that might be, carte blanche to do as they choose and advise as they choose with your children, with no age limitations whatsoever.
Consent.
The children can give consent. And then that was followed up by this 2548, this bill that passed that bans insurance companies who are being billed for these services from notifying the parents. Right. So you've got this perfect storm now where the children become basically their own administrators of their health situation, and they're not in a position to be able to do that.
So what's the parent to do?
Well, so what happens is at the beginning of the years, because the school districts, I think, are fairly sensitive to concerns about this with respect to feedback from parents and whatnot, I think what happens is primarily that we want to be passing, the message that we want to pass out is that parents get a consent form from their school. We'd like to be able to treat your child in the case of an emergency or this or that without necessarily taking the time to notify you. I mean, it's all about the children. That's one of my favorite sayings. It's all about the children. But the reality is that this can be abused. And it's because of these statutes that are in place and because Planned Parenthood has their fingerprints all over these school-based health centers. So this can come down to, and Perry, we talked about this before, even though it's a little off topic, is all this stuff about sexuality, gender identification and whatnot. It can become part of an abortion process, certainly contraceptives, counseling with respect to sexuality. I mean, there's all these implications that the school-based health centers are in, and Planned Parenthood is right in there helping them establish their curriculum and staffing these things. So what parents need to do is say no to the consent form. I want to be told or called or contacted whenever my child is being given any kind of medical treatment or medical advice. That's part of what I need to be involved with my parent.
Okay, so parents be aware, as you go back to school and these forms are sent home, I wouldn't just arbitrarily sign it. I would send a note back and say, no, I want to be notified under every circumstance.
Every circumstance. Yeah. And another quick website for people, parentsrightsined.net, parentsrightsined.net is a statewide organization that shows parents exactly what their rights are and what their basis is in the law. Right. Very good website.
All right, some big issues there. Don't forget this Saturday, 10 till noon, downtown 8th and Central in Medford. You can go online and just Planned Parenthood picket August 21st.
August 22nd.
Excuse me, August 22nd. Google that, and if you're in one of the outside areas, look for it in Grants Pass, Bend, all along the coast, whatever you may be, and be a part of it. Thank you, Bryan.
You're welcome.
And we'll keep plugging this throughout the week.
You bet.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back, and for quite some time we've been telling you about another great movie about ready to come out at the theaters. In fact, it will, coming up August 28th, so a little over a week away. It's the movie called War Room, and the reviews on this movie have been fantastic. There's also a workbook that goes with it, and you may want to check that out. We are delighted to have with us today one of the main actors on the film, better known as Tony Jordan, but his real name is TC Stallings, and he's also was in the movie Courageous. Perhaps you check that out with the football team there and everything. And but we want to talk to him about War Room. So TC, good to see you, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you know, I saw bits and pieces. Terrific movie. Tell us your thoughts about it.
Well, I'm really excited about it. For me personally, it was a joy to be a part of it. I was really challenged in a lot of ways to pull off this character that has this amazing, amazing arc of emotions. And so it was a blessing for me, fulfilling for me as an actor. But the fact that it's on prayer and the whole world is going to hear about Jesus and hear about prayer is just tremendously exciting. So, you know, I can't wait till August 28th.
Well, the subject of prayer going to a movie screen, that's pretty interesting, isn't it?
It is. And it's, man, I mean, I don't know the word for it in terms of how it's kind of unimaginable that this would be something that hits the screens and it gets to be in over 1,000 screens. And just at one point on starting on Friday, the whole world will get an opportunity to go to a theater and there's a movie that focuses on talking to Jesus. I mean, it's, I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad we've reached that point.
You know, so often when actors like yourself get involved in films like this, all of a sudden it personally touches them. That happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, it's and I've been saying this, it's just been affirming for me just how prayer works, because at this point in my life, I've had an opportunity to experience Jesus in prayer a lot. And so, you know, for those who are like me, who pray a lot, you thinking like, what can I possibly get out of this? You know, I kind of know how to pray. Well, there's so much to learn, because for me, I wasn't very good at counting my blessings a lot. And that helps when the Lord can be, you know, slow to answer, so you think, but really he's just on his timing. If you're counting your blessings and remembering what he did in the past when he made you wait before, you know, you can kind of calm down and say, oh, Lord, I remember that. So already one of the things I've taken away just from shooting the film, a prayer warrior myself, is to count the blessings more. And so there's a lot to learn, a lot to pick up, even if you are already a prayer warrior.
All right, so tell people your role. Tell people what you do in the movie. What's your role?
Well, my role in the film, I play the character of Tony Jordan. I'm a pharmaceutical salesman. I'm very, very successful. But the thing is, I live my life through my job. I live my life through my success. Tony Jordan, my character, could care less if the Lord blesses him. He'll go to church and come back home. He doesn't really care. What he cares about is if he remains the top dog at the company. And what this leads to is a disconnect from his family. He doesn't even know what his daughter does for activities. And his wife, he just wants her to respect him for the guy that he is. He's not connected. And so this leads to strife within the family. So on the outside, everything looks great. But behind closed doors, my marriage is crumbling and I'm losing my daughter. And so my wife goes and she meets because she sells real estate. So she meets one of her clients, Miss Clara. Miss Clara is an older, wiser prayer warrior, teaches my wife how to pray. My wife leaves me alone and stops fighting with me and starts talking to the Lord. And then the Lord teaches her how to fight properly through prayer. And then her prayers start to affect me. And then that's when things get interesting for Tony. And it starts chiseling off that hardness of his heart, and he goes through an incredible arc of emotions that I think people will enjoy to see happen.
The whole makeup that family that you play there is Tony Jordan. I think that could be magnified by millions across the country.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that will identify with Tony Jordan, and not only Tony, but several characters without the film. Everybody has some kind of thing that they have to do. For example, Tony's thing, his arc is really huge, but then there's my boss who has to practice some forgiveness. There's my wife who has to practice some yielding and giving the Lord control. So there's a little kid. So little kids around the world will understand what it like. Man, I can identify with her because my parents fight too. But then there's this other kid who has a family where everything's great. So I think everybody will find somebody to identify with this, but men will identify with me if you've ever had something out in front of you that you really, really want, and it becomes a driving force. You get tunnel vision on it, and everybody else who isn't on board, they're just getting in the way, including Jesus. If he ain't on board, he's getting in the way, and that's Tony Jordan.
All right. Again, the movie's called War Room. It'll be in the theaters a week from Friday. Do you think this has national implications?
I think it does, and the reason is because no matter what race you are, no matter what gender you are, prayer has no race, prayer has no gender. Neither does problems, neither does issues. And so everybody can pray about every issue. So this is a movie that anybody can see, no matter what your walk of life is. And for us as believers, this is just a movie that's telling you, hey, stop fighting the battle yourself. There were some battles you were never meant to fight in the first place, and just don't leave the Lord out of your battles. And so all across the world, all across the globe, whoever you are, there isn't a problem that we deal with that can't be addressed through prayer. So it's a movie that anyone can see, and it's a movie that can apply to anybody in any situation.
TC, one of the things that come out of this that was so interesting, because when you hear the word war room and you think, well, it's about prayer, you think, well, somebody's going in their prayer closet and they're going to pray. That does happen. But it's more strategic in that. There's a strategy to prayer. I mean, I think that's one of the big things that come out of here. It's just not necessarily going in the room and yelling out to God, but there's a strategy to it. Give us a little insight to that.
Well, one of the tagline is victories don't happen by accident. And another thing you hear saying is that, the battle is fought on your knees. So like when you read in Ephesians chapter 6 in the Bible, and it talks about this spiritual war that we fight. It says the battle is not against flesh and blood. And it goes into telling you that it's against Satan and his army and things like that. And then it goes through the whole armor of God and everything we're supposed to suit up with. But people kind of stop short of that scripture. At the very end, it says, and pray. Prayer is a weapon. And so the battle that we fight is against, all these sinful things and all these desires that are sinful and sinful people and sinful situations. So the thing is, you don't just want to go running into the battle without a plan. And I like to think of it in a real army. A guy, a soldier or a female soldier, like she or he could have the biggest bazookas, the biggest guns and the grenades and all these different things. And then they go running off into the battle ready to go, but they forgot their walkie-talkie. Without the walkie-talkie, you can't talk to the commander. Without talking to the commander, you don't know the battle plan. You don't know where the enemy is. And so you got all this stuff, but you can't use it properly. And you're basically a sitting duck. You don't know what you're doing. And that's how it is. You could be a very talented person. You could be, you can know all the scriptures, and all these different things. And you can really have the heart for Jesus and everything. But if you don't talk to him in prayer and get the plan for your life, for your day, he knows where the enemy is. He guides you in the war. That's the commander. And so that's kind of a great way of thinking of it. You're going in life and you're fighting this game of life, this war of life. But you want to talk to the commander so you know what to do with all those weapons, all those scriptures, and all those things like that. Okay, now, what would you say to the husband? Why would a husband need to go watch this movie? Well, if you're like me, you believe that the Lord has a purpose for your life, but not only your life, for your wife's life, for your son's life, for your daughter's life, for your whole family together. He has a plan for you guys. Psalms 139:16 tells us that he made us before we were born. Moment by moment was laid out before we ever lived a day. So if you believe that, then you don't want to be making decisions about your family, about your son or daughter, where we're going to live, what goals are we going to do, our goals, dreams, desires, without talking to the Lord, because you could be misguiding them. The Lord made them. I didn't. So I need to consult him about what I'm going to do with my family. What are we going to do? Where we're going to live? Where we're going to go? What kind of dreams, goals, desires we're going to have? So if you want to properly lead your family, and I certainly do. I don't know a person who wouldn't want to. And you believe that the Lord God made their life with a purpose, then you want to point them towards that purpose. So for me as a man, seeking the Lord every day for my family's purpose, each and every one of them individually, is paramount, priority, top thing that I do. So I know I'm leading and guiding them right. It's a humble thing to do because we men like to lay our hands on everything. But I love to just drop to my knees and say, Lord, what do you want me to do with my wife? What do you want me to do with my kids? Where should they go to school? What should they study? Give me the patience to let you guide them, let you lead them. And you cannot go wrong because you simply given it to the Lord. And now the Lord's responsible. And you just got to listen to what he tells you to do concerning your family. And so I hope men, because we're called to lead our families, I hope we take that away and we do so. And if there's a single woman who is leading her family, same thing. You're in charge now, and listen to the Lord and what he tells you to do with your children. But he knows their purpose. We don't. So it's I think it's foolish to not consult him about what we should do each day with our children's life and our family's life.
That is beautifully said. Again, it's called War Room. It'll be in the theaters a week from Friday, starting August 28th. And I can't tell you how important opening weekends are for movies. And we really need to be out there and to support this. So again, coming up a week from this Friday, August 28th, War Room. Make sure you get a ticket and go. What's next for TC? What are you looking at?
Well, I'm so excited because I'm writing. And just the very short version of this is I deal with students. I work with students. I've worked with college students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, junior highers, high schoolers, in youth ministry. And when I was talking to a group and I was saying, hey, if I only had, I want to quit. The Bible says that life is but a mist. You only live for a mist of time. And so I said, if today's the last day I want to talk to these kids, what would I want to tell these students? What would I want to tell them? And so I wrote these 14 points. We're using 14 scriptures that deal with seeking your God-given purpose. And after writing it and reading it, I loved it so much. I started, when I go around and speak around the country, I deliver the same message because I may not see you again. So this is my don't waste time, don't procrastinate, I may not see you ever again message. That's what it was. And Broad Street Publishers got a hold of it and read it, and they loved it. And so we signed a contract for me to publish my devotional, which will be coming out next year. So I'm extremely excited about that. We're working on the title and everything. But yeah, next year, people will be reading and seeing how to passionately pursue their God-given purpose for life. And it's everything we just talked about in the previous question. There's nothing more important than living for the reason God made you. And this devotional leans towards that. All right. Well, I can't wait till you get it published, and we'll have you back on. We'll talk about it. We'll go through those 14 points. Let me just say to our viewers and listeners, warroomthemovie.com is where you can go, maybe see a trailer. warroomthemovie.com. It'll be in the theaters a week from Friday, August 28th, and look for it. It is a life-changing movie. And TC, thank you, my friend. I love your spirit, and can't wait to have you back. All right, looking forward to it. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the support. All right, God bless you. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today. Don't forget, August 28th, go to it at the theaters. Let's support it.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.